The Dragon Prince was not like any other child. He was small for a dragon, but his fire burned hotter than the largest hearth in the palace. His scales shimmered like molten gold, and his eyes glowed with a mix of curiosity and mischief. Everyone in the Draconis Empire had heard stories about him, how he could destroy a room in minutes and frighten even the bravest warriors. He had thrown toys across halls, scorched curtains, and sent royal tutors running, crying for their lives. No one had ever tamed him. In the royal palace, the halls were quiet now. Staff whispered in corners, afraid to make a sound. The servants tiptoed past the Dragon Prince's chambers, holding their hands over their mouths to hide their fear. The prince sat on a pile of cushions in the middle of his room, huffing and puffing. A small wooden cart lay smashed in one corner, and a broken music box lay in pieces on the floor. He had been angry because his favorite toy soldier had fallen over. The palace had tried everything. Experienced dragon caretakers were brought in, and human babysitters were hired from faraway planets. Mages, warriors, and even retired generals had attempted to calm him. But none lasted long. One tutor had run screaming after the prince had set fire to a rug. A babysitter had fainted when the prince roared loud enough to shake the windows. The palace was filled with people who had failed, and everyone believed that no one could handle the Dragon Prince's tantrums. In the middle of this chaos, a new human arrived. His name was Ethan, a janitor from Earth, and he had been assigned to clean the palace. He was small, unassuming, and quiet. The royal staff barely noticed him at first. He had no weapons, no magic, and no special skills, just a broom and a bucket. To most, he seemed hopelessly unfit to be near the Dragon Prince. But Ethan had learned one thing long ago: dragons or children or anyone else, fear made problems worse. If you tried to fight fire with fire, it only got hotter. Ethan entered the prince's chamber carefully. He noticed the broken toys, the scattered cushions, and the scorch marks on the floor. He did not flinch. He did not gasp. He simply began sweeping the floor quietly, humming a simple tune he remembered from Earth. The Dragon Prince, who had been glaring at a burnt toy car, noticed this. His eyes narrowed, his small wings twitched, and he tilted his head. Who is that?" he asked in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. Ethan looked up. "Just cleaning," he said softly, without fear. "Your room is very messy. I thought I could help." The Dragon Prince blinked. Usually people screamed or ran. Sometimes they cried. But this human did nothing. He did not bow, he did not beg, he did not run. He only swept, moving carefully around scorch marks and broken toys. The prince's curiosity grew. He inched closer, sniffing the air as if testing whether this human was safe to touch, or safe to eat. Ethan noticed the tiny claws twitching, the way the prince's tail flicked with impatience. He understood a little about anger. He did not speak too loudly. He did not try to scold. He simply kept cleaning, humming a gentle song. The prince sat down on a cushion, watching him. No one had ever stayed in his room this long without running. Minutes passed. The prince's small roars became quiet grumbles. He leaned forward, his glowing eyes studying Ethan's calm movements. For the first time he felt something strange, interest or maybe amusement. He tried to roar again, louder this time, but the human did not flinch. Ethan's broom danced across the floor, sweeping dust and tiny bits of broken toy into a neat pile. "Why don't you run?" the prince asked finally. His voice was still loud but curious rather than angry. "Because I'm not afraid," Ethan replied simply. "I like helping." The prince's head tilted. No one had ever said that to him before. Usually people yelled or screamed or cried. He had never met anyone who just said simple words and meant them. He sniffed again, closer this time, testing the human. Ethan continued sweeping, humming softly, and carefully avoiding the scorch marks where the prince had tested his fire. For the first time the Dragon Prince laughed. It was a small, almost surprised laugh, like a spark in a dark room. He had never laughed before. No one had ever made him laugh. The sound was so strange, so new, that it made Ethan smile quietly. That day nothing was fixed. The broken toys were still in pieces and the room was still messy. But the impossible had happened. A human had entered the Dragon Prince's room, stayed, and survived. More than that, he had made the prince laugh. Outside the room, the palace staff whispered in amazement. They had never thought it possible. But Ethan did not care about their whispers. He only cared about understanding this small, fiery dragon and figuring out how to reach him in a way no one else ever could. From that moment, a quiet hope began to grow. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human janitor could succeed where everyone else had failed. And perhaps the Dragon Prince, with his fire and tantrums, could learn something new about kindness, patience, and laughter. The next morning the Dragon Prince woke up earlier than usual. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of his chamber, glinting off his golden scales. Normally, he would spend this hour roaring at the servants or breaking his toys for no reason. But today he felt curious. The small human janitor had not only stayed in his room yesterday, he had survived. And, more importantly, he had made the Dragon Prince laugh. Ethan arrived quietly, carrying his mop and bucket. He nodded politely at the guards outside the chamber, who were still too nervous to meet his eyes. The Dragon Prince watched from his pile of cushions. He was still skeptical. Just because the human had survived yesterday did not mean he was safe today. Dragons had memory and they were careful. "Good morning," Ethan said softly, stepping inside. His voice was calm, gentle, and unafraid. "Your room needs some cleaning." The prince's eyes narrowed. "Do you know what I did yesterday?" he asked, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I could have burned you. Or thrown you across the room. You could have cried or run, or screamed." Ethan set down his bucket and shook his head. "I saw what you did. I was careful. I just cleaned." The Dragon Prince leaned forward, curiosity shining in his glowing eyes. "Why didn't you run?" "Running doesn't solve anything," Ethan said simply. "And I wanted to see what happens if I stay." The prince tilted his head. No one had ever spoken like this to him. Usually people only yelled or begged. This human spoke calmly, without fear, without weakness. It made the prince feel different. A strange flutter ran through his chest, a mix of curiosity, surprise, and perhaps admiration. Suddenly the prince stomped his clawed foot on the floor. Dust and broken toys flew into the air. "I said I could burn you," he shouted, flames licking at the edge of a cushion. Ethan stepped back slightly but did not panic. He simply held up his mop, not as a weapon but as a gesture of peace. "I know," he said calmly. "But I am not afraid. Maybe you are angry because no one listens. Maybe I can help." The prince paused. This human was not scared. He did not fight. He did not scream. He only spoke softly and stood his ground. The Dragon Prince had never seen anything like it. He sniffed the air, circling Ethan slowly. Flames sparked from his nostrils, but he did not strike. "What can you do?" the prince asked finally, his voice lower, almost hesitant. "Everyone runs from me. They all say I am too wild. Too angry. Too dragon." Ethan smiled gently. "I can clean. I can sweep. I can pick up broken things. And I can listen. Sometimes that is enough." The prince snorted. "Listen? Why would anyone want to listen to me?" "Because you have things to say," Ethan said simply. "And if no one listens, then they don't understand. Maybe your toys break or you get angry, but that is okay. Everyone gets angry. Everyone makes mistakes." The prince considered this. He had never been told this before. Normally he was only scolded or ignored. He looked down at a broken toy dragon, the paint chipped and wings torn. No one had ever cared about it. Not even the tutors. Not even the royal caretakers. But Ethan picked it up carefully, examining it. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked. "It's broken, but it can still be fixed." The prince's eyes widened. "Fixed? Can it really be fixed?" "Yes," Ethan said, smiling. "Sometimes broken things just need a little patience. And a little care." For the first time, the Dragon Prince felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe someone could understand him. Maybe someone could help him, not with fear or anger, but with kindness. He crouched down and sniffed Ethan's sleeve, testing if this human was safe. Ethan stayed calm, letting the prince investigate. Then the unexpected happened. Ethan picked up a small piece of the broken music box and tapped it on the floor gently, making a soft, tinkling sound. "Do you want to see something funny?" he asked. He twirled the piece on his fingertip, making it spin and wobble like a tiny dancer. The Dragon Prince's eyes followed the spinning toy. It wobbled, it jumped, and then it fell over. And suddenly the prince laughed. A high-pitched, surprised laugh that echoed through the chamber. It was not a roar, not a yell. It was pure, joyful laughter. He had never made that sound before. Ethan smiled quietly. "See? Sometimes even little things can make a big difference." The prince sat back, panting lightly from laughter. You are not afraid of me," he said. You are different." "I am human," Ethan said simply. "We are usually a little different from dragons." The Dragon Prince tilted his head and snorted again, the sound turning into another laugh. For the first time he felt that maybe, just maybe, this human janitor could stay in his life. Not as a servant, not as a teacher, but as someone who understood him. And so, their strange friendship began. A human and a dragon, both curious and brave in their own ways, standing together in a room full of broken toys, soot, and laughter. The Dragon Prince was still amazed. No one had ever stayed in his room this long, let alone made him laugh. He puffed out a little smoke from his nostrils, watching Ethan move quietly around the scattered toys and cushions. The janitor hummed softly while picking up broken pieces of the prince's playthings. The room had been messy for years, but for the first time it felt calm. The next few days were strange for the palace. Word spread quickly. A human janitor had survived the Dragon Prince's room. More than that, he had made the prince laugh. The royal caretakers were shocked. Tutors whispered to each other in disbelief. "How is this possible?" one mage asked. "He should have burned the human by now." But Ethan did not care about whispers. He cared about understanding the Dragon Prince, about finding ways to reach him. He noticed small patterns in the prince's behavior. When he was bored, he tapped his claws on the floor. When he was frustrated, he stomped his tail. When he wanted attention, he nudged toys toward Ethan as if to ask, "Will you play with me?" One morning, the prince woke up in a particularly bad mood. His favorite toy dragon was missing a wing, and he had lost a small puzzle piece the night before. He stomped and growled, his small wings flapping angrily. Flames flickered at the edges of his claws. "I hate this. Everything is broken," he shouted, sending a cushion flying across the room. Ethan walked in calmly, carrying his mop. He did not run. He did not scream. He simply looked at the prince and smiled. "It's okay," he said softly. "We can fix it. We just need to be patient." The prince narrowed his glowing eyes. "Fix it? Nothing can fix this. Everything is broken. You don't understand." Ethan knelt down carefully, picking up the broken toy dragon. "I understand that it's frustrating," he said. "But breaking things doesn't help. We can rebuild them. We can try again. I will help." The prince puffed a small flame, angry but curious. "Why would you help me? Everyone else runs." "Because I'm not afraid," Ethan said simply. "And because I think you can learn to be calmer. Even dragons can learn." The prince tilted his head. He had never met anyone so patient. Normally people screamed or fled or yelled. But Ethan stayed calm, watching him, listening to him, and speaking softly. It made the prince feel different. He felt a spark of trust. Ethan then did something new. He began playing little games with the prince. He would toss small, harmless toys across the floor, making them wobble or spin in funny ways. He would mime silly actions, pretending to trip over a cushion or stumble when sweeping. The Dragon Prince watched, his curiosity growing. He tried to imitate Ethan, miming exaggerated movements and tiny jumps. Soon he was laughing again, his flames flickering in small bursts of joy rather than anger. "You're strange," the prince said, giggling, "but fun." Ethan smiled. "Humans can be strange," he said. "But sometimes strange is good. It makes life more interesting." Over the next week, the prince's tantrums began to change. Instead of roaring and destroying, he stomped and hissed, then stopped to watch Ethan calmly handle the chaos. The janitor never shouted or punished him. He simply stayed steady, using humor and patience to guide the prince's energy. When a toy broke, Ethan would sigh, shrug, and say, "Well, that's okay. We can fix it tomorrow." The prince learned that his anger did not have to scare everyone. One afternoon, the prince climbed onto a pile of cushions and glared at Ethan. "I am the Dragon Prince. I am supposed to be feared. Why aren't you afraid of me?" Ethan leaned on his mop, smiling quietly. "Because fear doesn't teach anything. You can roar, stomp, and breathe fire all you want, but it doesn't make people listen. If you want people to care, you need more than fear. You need trust, and maybe a little laughter." The Dragon Prince blinked. He had never heard these words before. Trust? Laughter? Could it really be more powerful than fire? He puffed a tiny flame at a cushion, then looked at Ethan. "Are you really not afraid?" "I'm really not afraid," Ethan said. "And I think you'll see that being playful can be more fun than being angry. You can roar, but you can also laugh. You can stomp, but you can also dance. You just have to try." The prince considered this. He pawed at a broken toy dragon and then nudged it toward Ethan. "Will you play with me?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "Of course," Ethan said, smiling. He took the toy carefully and made it spin and wobble, making the Dragon Prince laugh again. The sound was pure joy, small but bright, echoing through the palace. From that moment, a new routine began. Ethan would enter the room each day, calm and steady, turning tantrums into play, anger into curiosity, and fire into laughter. The palace staff could hardly believe it. The Dragon Prince, once untamable, was learning patience and joy from a simple human janitor. For the first time in his life, the Dragon Prince did not feel alone. He had someone who understood him, someone who could turn his anger into fun. And Ethan, the quiet human janitor, had found a way to break the cycle of tantrums, proving that courage, patience, and laughter could be stronger than fire. Days passed and the Dragon Prince began to change. He was still small, still fiery, and still mischievous, but something inside him was different. His tantrums became shorter, his roars less frightening, and his laughter more frequent. He would watch Ethan as the human moved through his room, quietly cleaning, humming, or carefully playing with broken toys. The janitor had become a steady presence, a calm in the storm of the prince's energy. The palace staff whispered in amazement. No one could believe it. A human janitor had not only survived the Dragon Prince's room but had also tamed him in a way that no tutor, mage, or warrior had ever done. The royal caretakers were baffled. "How is it possible?" one whispered to another. "He's supposed to be untamable." But Ethan did not care about whispers. He cared about understanding the Dragon Prince, learning his moods, and helping him turn anger into play. He noticed small signs. When the prince flicked his tail quickly, he was frustrated. When he tapped his claws on the floor, he was bored. When he nudged a toy toward Ethan, he wanted attention. Ethan responded patiently every time, never scolding, never shouting, never running. One afternoon, the prince sat on a pile of cushions, watching Ethan carefully. "I don't like lessons," he said. "All the tutors make me angry. Why do you do it differently?" Ethan smiled. "Because I listen," he said simply. "I watch, I try to understand, and I never force anything. I think you are smart and strong, but even strong dragons can get frustrated. That's okay. It's how we handle it that matters." The Dragon Prince blinked. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Usually people only yelled or fled. But Ethan's words made sense in a strange, quiet way. He pawed at a broken toy dragon and nudged it toward Ethan. "Will you help me fix it?" he asked. "Of course," Ethan said, smiling. He picked up the toy carefully and spun it, making it wobble and dance. The prince laughed, a high, happy sound that echoed in the room. Flames flickered gently from his nostrils, not as a threat, but as a sparkle of excitement. From that day they began playing small games together. Ethan would throw tiny toys across the floor, making them spin or wobble. The prince would chase them, flap his wings, and roar playfully. Sometimes Ethan would pretend to stumble while sweeping, and the prince would giggle at the human's exaggerated movements. Little by little, the prince learned that play and laughter could be more fun than anger and destruction. One morning, the Dragon Prince did something unexpected. He climbed onto Ethan's shoulder, tiny claws gripping gently, and whispered, I like you. You're my friend." Ethan froze for a moment, surprised. A dragon saying he liked someone? That was rare. He smiled warmly. "I like you too," he said. "Friends help each other and friends make each other laugh." The prince's eyes glowed brighter than ever. "Then, will you stay with me every day?" "I will," Ethan promised. And from that moment, a new bond formed, one of trust, care, and laughter. The Dragon Prince no longer roared out of anger alone. He roared with excitement, with joy, and sometimes just to get Ethan's attention. The janitor became more than a cleaner. He was a teacher of patience, a guide for play, and the only person who could turn tantrums into laughter. Outside the chamber, the palace staff watched in awe. Courtiers who had once fled in fear now smiled quietly. Tutors who had shouted and scolded had been proven wrong. Even the mages and warriors were amazed. A human, small and unarmed, had succeeded where the greatest of the Draconis Empire had failed. And the human never boasted. He never demanded praise. He only cared about the Dragon Prince. Over the next weeks, the prince learned to show small acts of kindness. He shared toys, he waited patiently for Ethan to finish cleaning before stomping around, and sometimes he would even nudge a cushion toward a servant to help them rest. The palace was filled with cautious hope. Could a dragon truly change? Could laughter and trust really tame fire? The Dragon Prince still had energy. He still had moments of frustration. But now there was balance. He roared less in anger and more in play. He breathed fire only to light candles or warm the room. And every day he waited for Ethan to arrive, carrying his mop and bucket, ready to turn another tantrum into a game, another roar into a laugh. One evening, as the sun set over the palace towers, the Dragon Prince curled up on his cushions. Ethan sat nearby, carefully cleaning the scattered toys. The prince stretched his wings and whispered almost shyly, "You are the best. No one else can do what you do." Ethan smiled softly, finishing his work. "And no one else will," he said. "Because you are unique and I am learning from you too." Friends learn from each other. The Dragon Prince purred softly, a small, happy rumble. He had never felt this way before. Trust, friendship, patience. He realized that being powerful did not mean being feared. It meant understanding, caring, and sometimes simply laughing. And so, the bond between the Dragon Prince and the human janitor grew stronger every day. One was a young, fiery dragon learning the meaning of patience and joy. The other was a quiet human who proved that courage, kindness, and understanding could succeed where strength and fear had failed. Together, they turned tantrums into laughter, fire into play, and a lonely palace into a home full of hope. The palace was buzzing with excitement. Visitors from distant planets had come to see the Dragon Prince, expecting a fierce and untamable child. Stories of his tantrums had spread across the galaxy, and everyone assumed the same chaos would occur today. Tutors had warned the visitors to be careful, and guards were ready, swords in hand. But the Dragon Prince was different now. His tantrums had become rare, and his roars were playful instead of frightening. He watched Ethan quietly sweep the floor, humming a soft tune. The janitor had become a part of the palace routine. The prince waited for him, not with anger, but with anticipation. "Why is the human here again?" asked a visiting noble, peering into the chamber. "He's just a janitor. What can he possibly do with a dragon prince?" The Dragon Prince puffed a small flame at the edge of his cushion but did not roar. He was calm, more confident than ever. "Watch," he said, a small smile curling his mouth. "He's not just a janitor. He's my friend." Ethan continued his work quietly, picking up broken toys and arranging cushions. He did not bow or speak loudly. He did not need to. The Dragon Prince was already watching closely. Ethan picked up a small, broken puzzle and spun it gently on the floor, making it wobble and dance. The prince pounced on it, trying to catch it, and then laughed, a high, joyful sound that filled the chamber. The visitors gasped. They had expected a tantrum, a roar, maybe even fire. But instead, they saw the Dragon Prince laughing, chasing a small toy, and then looking back at the human janitor with glowing eyes full of trust. He's laughing," whispered a guard. "And he's not angry?" Ethan knelt carefully and spun another small toy across the floor. "See," he said softly. "Play can be more powerful than anger. Laughter can be stronger than fear." The Dragon Prince caught the toy and bounced it on his claws, giggling. He nudged it toward Ethan again. "Again?" he shouted excitedly. And Ethan smiled and repeated the game, making the prince laugh even harder. The visitors were amazed. They watched as the Dragon Prince shared the toys with them, inviting them to play, instead of roaring or frightening them. They began to understand that this little dragon, feared across the galaxy, had learned something powerful: trust, friendship, and patience. Is this human responsible?" one noble whispered. "He's only a janitor." "Yes," said the head tutor quietly, nodding. "He has done what no one else could. He has tamed the tantrums, not with power, not with fear, but with patience and kindness. The Dragon Prince trusts him." The prince puffed a tiny flame that sparkled like gold in the sunlight. He climbed onto Ethan's shoulder, laughing, and whispered, You are the best. No one else understands me like you do." Ethan smiled softly. "And no one else will," he replied. "You are unique. We learn from each other. That's what friends do." The Dragon Prince looked around at the visitors. "You see," he said proudly, "he is not just a janitor. He is my friend. He helped me see that I don't have to scare everyone to be strong. I can laugh. I can play. I can be a better dragon." The visitors nodded in awe. A human, small and ordinary in appearance, had achieved what warriors, mages, and tutors could not. He had earned the respect of a Dragon Prince and shown that courage, patience, and understanding could surpass fear and power. Over the next few days the palace changed. The Dragon Prince continued to laugh and play, and Ethan stayed by his side, guiding him with quiet wisdom. Staff who had once feared the prince now joined in small games. Tutors took notes from Ethan's patience. Even the king and queen were impressed. They saw that their heir, once untamable, was now learning not only control but joy and friendship, all because of a human janitor. One evening, the Dragon Prince curled up on a pile of cushions, his golden scales glowing softly in the lantern light. Ethan sat nearby, cleaning the scattered toys. The prince lifted his head and whispered, You made me happy. No one else could do that." Ethan placed his mop gently against the wall and smiled. "That's what friends do," he said. "We help each other. We turn frustration into laughter, anger into play. You are strong, but you are also kind, and that makes you even stronger." The Dragon Prince purred softly, a low, happy rumble. He realized that strength was not only about fire and claws. It was about trust, laughter, and the courage to be patient. And he realized that humans, often underestimated across the galaxy, could achieve incredible things through heart and understanding. From that day on, the Dragon Prince and the human janitor were inseparable. The palace staff no longer feared tantrums. The visitors marveled at the unusual friendship. And across the galaxy the story spread. A human, small and ordinary, had tamed the mighty Dragon Prince, not with magic or power but with patience, laughter, and friendship. Ethan continued his work quietly, never seeking praise, but the Dragon Prince never forgot him. Together they proved something important. Sometimes the smallest, simplest beings can change the world in ways that no fire or sword ever could. And for the Dragon Prince, life had become brighter, warmer, and full of laughter, all thanks to a human who dared to stay when everyone else ran.